this is John Bartlett from Brentwood Growth. We're doing another episode of our Sell or Scale podcast episode where we're talking to different buyers that are in different sectors. And I'm very happy today to have with me David Zickler with Radnor Roofing. David, thank you for spending a few minutes with us this afternoon.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks for having me on.
So to get us started here, tell us just briefly about your background and how the firm has come together and what it is that you guys are looking for.
Yeah. Radnor at its simplest, we're a private equity backed residential roofing platform. And so we acquire residential roofing businesses and kind of convert them from independently operated to being a part of a family of brands. Mm-hmm. My background was not in construction or the trades or roofing at all. I was an investment banker, a lot like you. And I kind of always had the itch to go operate and, looked at lots of opportunities. This one presented itself. I've got some great partners alongside me in it. And, it's been a lot of fun. We got started in May of 2024 with our first acquisition, acquired our second business in August of last year. Mm-hmm. And we're on the hunt for deals 3 and 4 right now.
Well, good. Well, that's great. There's been a ton of interest from private equity firms in the roofing space in the last 3 or 4 years. What's driven that interest? And all of a sudden, why have roofers become so attractive to institutional money, institutional investors, private equity? What's driven that?
Yeah, well, I think over the last few decades, private equity at large has had so much success with similar strategies in landscaping and pest control and HVAC. And so they start looking around the home and they start thinking, hey, what are the other large addressable markets that are fragmented and that we can likely improve on the operations? I think that's it. I mean, roofing's a massive sector, somewhere between 75,000 to 100,000 independent roofing contractors in the U.S. Mm-hmm. $50-60 billion plus annual, market. And so there's just lots of opportunities to go in and make acquisitions and hopefully make the businesses better as you go.
Yeah, good. That certainly makes sense. The acquisitions that you guys have done so far, what are the similar characteristics and similar profiles about those acquisitions?
Yeah, so our strategy is really we want to be multi-market. We say our acquisition criteria is anywhere east of the Rockies, really. That's just because I'm headquartered in Nashville. Our chief operating officer's in Atlanta. It's a proximity thing, but we want to be in tier 1, tier 2 markets east of the Rockies. Some groups you'll find just want to do retail or just want to do insurance. We're really open to both. We think to kind of maximize the opportunity, you need to do both, particularly in some markets. There are other markets where you can really just be retail, but we really want to acquire businesses that we feel like we have the opportunity to accelerate organic growth through sort of aligning marketing incentives and sales process. And so 2 of the things we bring to the table is kind of expertise on the marketing side, so getting more leads in the door, and then the sales process, just getting your close rate higher. And so businesses that have great brands with good people who have run the businesses the right way, but if they can be complemented by better marketing practices and better sales practices, then we feel like it can be a win everybody.
Got it. So when you're looking at an opportunity, you don't have a specific filter or a strong point of view on what that revenue mix needs to look like and has to look like in terms of the percent of the revenue. How much of it might be new construction? How much of it might be insurance storm related? How much of it's regular retail related? You're not putting specific parameters on that on the front end.
We don't want to be too prescriptive, but I will say we know where we're going. And so
Hmm.
each piece of the pie doesn't have to align perfectly, but we know
Yeah,
what the whole pie wants to look like.
yeah,
And
yeah.
for us, that's basically zero new construction or
Got it,
minimal
got
new
it,
construction.
got it, got it.
If it's less than 5% of revenue or less than 10% of revenue, it's probably not all that important anyway.
Right.
Um, and we're predominantly residential. That's our identity. Now, look, there's lots of light commercial that roofers end up
Yeah,
doing. That's
yeah,
fine too. But our
yeah.
our core identity is residential repair and replace.
What about size?
Size in terms of the size of the businesses.
Yeah, yes, in terms of revenue size, in terms of profit size, in
Yeah,
terms of internal infrastructure that you want that business to have. And in a minute, I'm going to talk about W-2 employees versus 1099s,
yeah,
but but let's talk about size and sort of infrastructure.
sure. Yeah, size. I mean, our typical deal is going to fall in the 5 million to 25 million of revenue.
Okay,
Um, And so I'd say somewhere beyond 5 million in revenue, most business owners have to kind of make the decision: are they going to be a business or are they going to be a hustle?
right.
We're not going to acquire hustles, and those are pretty easy to sniff out.
Hmm.
But if a business is $5-10 million of revenue and it's got a lot of key man risk
Yeah,
and things like that, it becomes harder. But if you've built out the team and people have clear job responsibilities, W-2 and 1099 is a part of that.
yeah.
We'll get into it. Those things are pretty important to us, and we align on a sales plus production model. So
Hmm.
we like having a sales team run the appointment, and
Hmm.
then a production team sort of order, schedule subcontractors, and be on the job to manage the subs for each job.
Um, in thinking about the infrastructure, um, how do you look at owner dependency that the business has? How critical the owner's day-to-day responsibilities are, and how do you view that in terms of there being additional risk, if you will, in terms of that business because of the owner dependency?
Yeah, I mean it's so common in deals this size. Um, we see it a lot, and I think that if I was an owner wanting to embark on selling my business sometime in the next 2 years, I think the most valuable thing they could do is start to offload as much
Right,
and get those into other people's hands.
right,
For us, it becomes increasingly more difficult to do a deal if there is significant key man risk with that
right,
owner. I
right,
think ways that you get around that is, having them roll more equity, or, finding other ways for them to be economically on the hook for the success of the business. But there's no doubt it becomes more challenging if the one guy is really responsible for
got it, got it.
all of the revenue.
Um, W-2 employees versus 1099s. So let's talk about sales, members of the sales team first. How do you view a business's the structure of their sales team, W-2s versus 1099s?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we're not a big door knock company. We're not
Yeah.
above it. We do some door knocking, but most of our sales reps are running company leads,
Hmm.
and all of our sales reps are W-2.
Hmm.
Um, and really, it's from a legal perspective, it's a way to
Right.
avoid misclassification issues.
Yeah.
From a business practice standpoint, um, we're going to put appointments on their calendar. They're going to have to run it. They're going to run it with a company truck, company provided materials,
Yeah.
and tools, and they're going to have a company branded, attire on, and they're going to be a part of the team. And we
Yeah.
also want to build a culture where
Yeah.
people like being part of the team.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Culture is incredibly important, and I think if you've got guys that are not fully bought in or have side jobs, it's harder to really build that culture. So it's important from a business practice standpoint as well as a legal standpoint.
And of course, there's a lot of using subs in the field for the actual roofing itself,
Mm-hmm.
swinging the hammers. But there needs to be some sort of quality control between the company and the subs. What do you like to see in terms of sort of what that field management quality control looks like?
So much of this to me comes back to the customer experience. We try to really elevate the customer experience. I think you can, if you're in a tier 1 or tier 2 market, there's lots of competition
Right.
in roofing. And I think you can beat out 80 to 90% of those folks just by elevating customer experience.
Yeah.
And part of that on the production side is, we show up, we communicate with the homeowner, we manage the crews, we make sure they're picking up every nail.
Right.
We make sure that they have what they need. We can be a runner for them.
Right.
We make sure they're using the right safety protocols.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go through a check with the homeowner at the end of the job, and let them point out anything that doesn't look right, and also kind of tell them what we did, and it gives them a chance to kind of have some closure. It's not like they get home in the evening and the roof's done and they didn't hear from us again. We've got a pretty clear quality control sign off there.
What about the operational sort of technology stack, if you will? What are you wanting them to have in terms of what they're using from a job costing, job management CRM standpoint? What are you wanting them to use from a financial reporting standpoint?
Yeah, so we've identified our tech stack that we're going to use long term,
Mm-hmm.
and really it's not to get into the nitty gritty of it, but it's really, if you're running a $10 million roofing business, your needs may be different than if you're trying to manage a $100 million roofing business across multiple brands.
Mm-hmm.
Tech enabling our businesses is going to be, I don't think the average owner operator understands how much time and efficiencies it can save by using technology the right way. We talk about almost everything we do through the lens of people, process, and technology.
Right.
And so, who are the people that are going to do it? What's the process they can stick to? And what's the technology we can use to make that easier?
Got it.
And I think that part of the biggest challenge of firms embarking on what we're doing is going to be to really create an integrated process to where all of these brands are operating on the same technology. And while they keep their brand and they keep their employees, and to the outside world, really nothing's changed about their business,
Right.
from a management standpoint, things can become a whole lot simpler. But it takes some work on the front end to put it all together.
A few minutes ago, you mentioned rollover equity,
Yeah.
which gets me thinking about deal structures. Given the deals that you've closed and deals that you're looking at, what I know nothing's typical, but if you had to sort of categorize what a normal deal structure would a transaction structure would look like in terms of the various components, maybe the cash component, maybe a seller note component, maybe an earnout component, maybe a rollover equity component. How would you perhaps see those potentially being broken out?
Yeah. I mean, you said the typical one, and the best I can do is kind of describe the typical one. We try not to be prescriptive. The only way, these deals are complicated, they're emotional. Most people, it's their first time going through it. We want to craft a deal that works for both sides. We want to create alignment of interest. I think alignment of interest is kind of the buzzword that we talk about the most, and we want to make sure that, because while you're negotiating a deal and you're going through due diligence, you're on opposite sides of the table. But if you get to closing and that seller, they get a big chunk of change, the next day you turn around and you're on the same side of the table, and
Right.
you want to be aligned in how you're trying to grow the business and make it even better. And so our typical deal is where, Radnor acquires 100% of the target, and the seller has the option to roll equity into Radnor. And so, an example might be if a business is worth $100, maybe they get $80 at closing in cash, and $20 would be given shares in Radnor. And so they become incentivized for the success of the greater platform.
And then let's say in the example that you just used, the 20% that they reinvest in Radnor,
Mm-hmm.
if it's an owner that's in his 50s or 60s and he wants to keep working for another 5 years or 7 years or something, but he's got an end game in mind. How do they monetize that 20% that they're holding within Radnor? How does that flow back to them ultimately in cash?
Yeah. Most private equity backed platforms, and we're not different, are under kind of a target 5-year hold period.
Okay.
Um, and what we want to do is we want to grow and create the best business we can in our
Right.
call it roughly 5-year timeline.
Right.
And eventually there will be another owner of Radnor Roofing.
Right.
The 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 name on our door won't change. Our brands won't change, but eventually ownership will transition. And when that ownership transitions, all the equity holders will be rewarded for it, hopefully.
Got it.
And so that's kind of the trigger event that they would be able to get kind of that, what I call the second bite at the apple.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, so from the time you make an offer and the offer is accepted, from that point forward, how long does it take to get a deal closed, and what are the typical steps within that period of time that need to take place for that deal to be able to close?
Yeah, such a good question. And I think this is probably the stage of the process that sellers that haven't done it before are least familiar with. I think typically it's a 60 to 90 day process.
Right.
I think things that can push it towards 60 days are if on day one of that process, you're fully prepared, numbers are put together, administratively, you've got all your legal documents in place so that, we as the buyer can go into due diligence and hopefully only have to request things once. I think what can stretch it to 90 days and beyond is if some of that stuff isn't ready, or if it's unorganized, or if the numbers aren't clean. But you asked about what does that really entail? I think the three big buckets are kind of financial diligence, legal diligence, and business or operational diligence. And financial diligence is just understanding the numbers and trying to get a really clear view of what the historical business has been. We hire a third party firm to do that for us. Legally, same thing. Let's go through all the subcontractor agreements. Let's go through every agreement that's within the business. What red flags or yellow flags are out there, if any. And on the business side, for a group like us that's already in the industry, we do this in house, but it's really just understanding every nook and cranny of the business. And really all of this is geared towards how do we make, this takes 60 to 90 days, but then after you close the deal, you go to transitioning ownership and integrating, and it's how do you make that easier? How do we develop a plan to where we can integrate this thing quickly and efficiently and hopefully as painless as possible for everyone?
Got it. When does an owner tell his employees?
Yeah. This is always up to the owner. I'd say in some situations, they're going to be required to introduce key employees during the diligence process.
Right.
So for instance, if an owner wants to retire pretty soon after, but they've got a general manager or a sales manager in place, the buyer understandably wants to be able to meet those people. They're key considerations in how they're underwriting the deal. But I think for the most part, it's normally not communicated until, right when the deal closes. And it's something we want to be very thoughtful about is, deals that we close, we are on site when the manager or when the owner announces it. We do one-on-ones with every single employee. We tell them up front what things are changing, if any. We're honest with them. We really desire for the businesses that we acquire to kind of continue to thrive. And we want the people there to be able to create a good culture that they can kind of own the culture of. So that transition, we try to be as thoughtful as possible. But there are some situations where you need to meet key people during diligence to make sure they are who they said they were.
That's helpful. After the business closes, what looks different or what looks the same to the owner, to the employees, to vendors, and to the customers?
hopefully to the vendors and the customers, everything looks the same. I think over time, there are things that hopefully we can continue to do better. Every business, there's constant change. You always want to elevate the customer experience process. To the employees, it should mostly look the same. Are they going to get a new employee handbook? Yeah. Is there going to be anything scary in there? No. Um, you know, um, we offer health benefits and 401k with a match to every employee of ours. Hopefully, that's a positive change for all of them. We have other tools and resources we'd like to bring to the table that some businesses may not have. But hopefully, not much changes because the brand stays in place. Hopefully, they feel a sense of relief that something like this has passed, but they're still able to kind of own their culture.
Got it. Got it. Well, that sounds awesome. I guess final question. If they're residential roofers listening to this, and they're not quite ready for the business to sell, but they're trying to get the business in better shape so that groups like you would be interested in their business a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, whatever the timeline is.
Yeah.
What would be some of the or a couple of key points that you would stress that they emphasize on focusing within the business to get the business in a better shape for someone like you to be interested in it?
Yeah, I think professionalizing every corner of the business you can is it. It may seem like a pain because it might not have an impact day one on revenue or profitability, but having a really great CPA to where you know your numbers,
Mm-hmm.
having a good attorney to where you know that your subcontractor agreements, your employee agreements, all of those things are in good working order. They don't have to be perfect, but you don't need to have any major holes there. I think, and then also the job responsibilities of the team,
Mm-hmm.
getting as much of that off of the seller as possible.
Mm-hmm.
If a seller of the business can't go on a 2 to 3 week vacation and the business can't keep operating, then they're probably not ready yet to get
It's
the
not
best
ready.
deal.
Yeah.
I'm not saying a deal's not going to be out there for them, but it's going to be hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good advice. Anything in closing?
No, I don't think so. Thanks for having me on. This was a lot of
Thank you
fun.
so much, man. And we'll put your contact details in the notes here. And if anyone wants to reach out to you directly, they can. Or if they want to come through us, we'll be happy to put the two of you in touch together. David, thank
Yeah.
you so much for your time, and have a great afternoon.
Yeah. Thanks, John.
Okay,
You
man.
too.
Thank you.
See you.